can you enforce a promise? What do I mean by that? Well, let's just say somebody promises to do something for you, and then they don't do it, they renege on the deal. Do you have any legal recourse? Generally speaking, no. In England and Wales, and many jurisdictions, we can only enforce agreements if they are actual contracts. And for a contract to arise, there has to be something called consideration. Something of value changes hands. Now, it doesn't have to be a fair deal, but to give a common example, you want to exercise an option. You want first dibs on a property if somebody's going to sell it. If they just say, yeah, of course you can have first dibs, but then when it comes time to sell, they sell to somebody else, there's nothing you can do about that. So usually with an option, we'd just give £1 or some token consideration, you know, this idea of peppercorn rents. So, okay, in exchange for £1, you will grant me the first option to purchase this if you ever decide to sell it. And that's a contract, because £1 has taken hands. Now, that might not reflect the actual value of the option or what it's really worth in a commercial sense, but something's changed hands. Consideration is necessary but need not be adequate, as we say. And you know, you get this idea of peppercorn rents where you just hand over a peppercorn, and that gives you an enforceable lease agreement, whereas if somebody said, no, you can just stay there, they could just evict you at whim. But we talk about something called promissory estoppel, or the doctrine of estoppel. It has many names, and there are different types of estoppel, but they all boil down to this. In reliance upon something said to you, you act to your detriment. And it's the detriment thing that's important. If you just don't change anything or in your personal circumstances, then estoppel doesn't arise. But say, for example, you're leasing somewhere and you just can't afford the rent. So you say, well, actually, Mr. Landlord, I'm going to exercise my right to terminate this lease. And the landlord says, oh, no, don't worry about it. I'm happy to accept half rent. Okay? So you don't need to shop around elsewhere. So you stay there. But then down the line, the landlord comes and says, actually, I'm suing you for the full value of the rent. Well, legally he's entitled to do that, because at common law, there is a contract there. The contract was varied, but there was no consideration on your part. You didn't give the landlord anything different. I mean, if it was a situation, well, tell you what, I'll do half rent, but pay it up front, or give me a lump sum now, and I'll let you off the rent for the rest of the year. In that particular case, there has been consideration, because you've done something, you've given something of value in exchange, because the landlord gets the money, you know, earlier, or you know, up front, or overall gets a larger sum. But if you don't do that, what have you given up? Well, you have given up the right to shop around and try and find cheaper premises. You have acted to your detriment. You can say, well, hang on a second. And you can raise this as a defence in court. You can say, hang on a second, but for that promise, I would have shopped around and found cheaper premises. So it's too late for him to come and sue now. And this is the whole thing that estoppel is an equitable remedy. So that's one of those remedies where the common law is inadequate. A strict legal interpretation doesn't produce a fair result. One thing to remember is, in England and Wales, generally speaking, estoppel is a shield, not a sword. You can only use it to stop somebody exercising their legal rights and suing you. Hi. Oh, doggo. That's different, say, for instance, in the US. In the US, say, for some instance, you said, oh, I'm looking at renting this property, but I can't afford it. And one of your friends said, oh, don't worry, I'll pay the rent. So you sign up the lease, and then they say they're not going to do that. Arguably, over there, you can actually sue, because you've got yourself into a lot of legal exposure and potential debt, and you wouldn't have done had they not have promised that to you. So there you go. It is a very useful one, because it can provide a very handy defence, especially where there is a pre-existing contract in place, and for circumstances you vary it but without consideration. I mean, you can vary contracts and just use normal contractual rules. So you can agree and say, we will vary this contract. That's something that is done in writing, and effectively it creates either an amended contract or a new agreement. But if you don't do that and you just have little sort of, words in the pub or something like that, normally they wouldn't be binding. But if you can point to a detriment on your behalf, and that you only got into that mess because of what you were told. If you'd just, done it anyway, regardless of what you were promised, again, promissory estoppel doesn't arise. But yeah, like I say, it's a useful one. So remember that if, as a result of something that somebody said to you, you do something that is to your detriment that you wouldn't have done otherwise, then promissory estoppel applies. So there you go. As always, hope you found that vaguely useful and vaguely interesting. I'm going to go find somewhere a bit more light now to edit this, assuming it's actually recorded. Nice viaduct this. You might notice there are two, because when Brunel built this railway, they said, quick, get it up quickly. And he said, well, no. Trains are going to be really heavy, so we need to build proper viaducts. And they said, well, trains aren't heavy at the moment, and, we're your shareholders, so just get something up. So they built the temporary viaduct, and then later on, when trains did get bigger, they built the proper one next to it. So there you go, if you were just wondering. And there's loads down here in Cornwall. I know of at least 20 where you've got the two viaducts running parallel to each other. So anyway, that was a nice way of padding it out. If you liked this, as always, please consider liking, sharing and subscribing.